So I could only do that. Oh,
I think we have the people in the room.
shall we start inviting them in?
We shall
Yeah.
we?
Awesome.
Why we get all quiet like we get onto an elevator? How we're just like yapping away, and then we get into the elevator, and everybody becomes silent.
We're also
Recording has begun.
we're like
Hello,
so
everybody. Good
conscious.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi,
I guess
everyone.
people like
Hi. The
Good
recording has
afternoon.
begun.
This is the one and only Dolly Martinez, co-chair of the Women's Conference.
good to
Hello.
see you all.
Wait, I'm sorry. Can I say it? Can I say it? Will you forgive me? Hello, Dolly.
Hello. Thank you for joining us today.
Of course, thank you for having us. The honor is really ours. So thank you. Thank you for accepting our application. Yes. And I love your brooch too that you have on your jacket.
Oh, brilliant.
It has to be purple.
Has to be purple. You see the theme. You see the theme.
Indeed, my shirt is purple. So we received the assignment. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah.
I want to thank everyone for being here with us. It's amazing. So should we get started? Take it away.
Okay, well, I'll kick us off. Well, first, bon après-midi et bienvenue tout le monde. Thank you for being here. It's truly a pleasure to moderate this conversation and to be in dialogue with women whose work I deeply respect. My name is Taina Wagnac. I have transitioned from my role at the New York Immigration Coalition, and I am the new Director of Government Affairs at CICU. And today's conversation is called Navigating Complexity. Yes, we're making changes, we're moving on up. And so today's conversation really is aligned with the work that we're doing. It's called Navigating Complexity, How Women Lead Advocacy in Uncertain Time. And I think that title speaks directly to the reality that many of us know very well, which is that advocacy is rarely clean, linear, and almost never predictable. That it happens in motion, right? It happens while conditions are shifting, decisions are incomplete, and all while our communities are asking us to remain steady, even when the ground beneath us is moving. And so, what I appreciate about today's panel is that it creates that space for honesty to talk about that reality, to pulling back the curtain on the leadership experience, and particularly how women navigate that complexity while staying grounded in purpose and all the while continuing to lead with intention. And so it's because leading loudly does not always mean being the loudest person in the room, right? So some of the most powerful leaders I have known are not the people who dominate every conversation, but more so the ones whose words create direction, right? Whose questions shift thinking and whose steadiness really changes what becomes possible. And so for me today's theme of voice, vision, and value really works like a three-pronged leg table, right? Where you need all three legs for leadership to hold. Because if one missing leg, the whole thing start wobbling. And in advocacy, enough is already wobbling. And so with leading with voice, right, it means simply not by speaking, but being intentional about what we carry forward. Leading with vision is what keeps us from only reacting to the moment, but allow us to see beyond the immediate barriers and staying connected to where we're trying to move people. And the last one, valor for me, is the discipline of staying in the works when it becomes uncomfortable, when you are misunderstood or discouraged. And so, as I mentioned, if one of those legs is missing, the whole thing becomes unstable. You can have voice without vision and simply react, and you can have vision without value and you never move forward. And today, I think it's become even more layer when you are leading as a woman, particularly as an immigrant woman or a woman of color, right? Because often you're not only doing the work, but you're also navigating whether your leadership is being fully seen and whether your analysis is trusted, and or whether your voice is being heard before someone else repeats what you were just saying 2 seconds ago. And so there's a particular experience that many women know, right? You say something, it lands softly, and then 5 minutes later, someone says the same thing, and suddenly everyone's ready to build a strategy around this. And so that is that discipline, right, that we learn on how to lead when your presence is underestimated even before you start speaking. And so that is why, again, I'm very especially glad to have this conversation with the women before us, because each of them lead in spaces where complexity is not theoretical, but it's actually a daily practice, right? And these are leaders that I've had the utmost pleasure of not just working alongside with, but learning from, right? And having them guide me as I'm also building my own political power. And so starting with Na'ilah Amaru, who is an advocacy and policy strategist. She brings extraordinary strategic clarity to advocacy ecosystem. She understands power, institution, coalition, movement. And because, she has all, she has more hours than we do. She's also a PhD candidate whose research focuses on social justice coalition. So really an utmost pleasure to work with her, but also get to know her as an individual person. And then next, as for panelists, we have Mimi Kofi, who is an advocate for formerly incarcerated women. She leads with lived experience. She has deep commitment to justice impacted women and a kind of leadership that really consistently reminds us that system change must stay accountable to the actual people. And then last, but certainly not least, we have Joan Bakiriden, apologies for mispronouncing, who is a longtime civil rights advocate and a leader and also the president of the NAACP Brooklyn branch. She carries decades of civil rights leadership, community trust, and moral clarity and work that really has shaped civic participation and collective power in New York. So you have some very powerful people before you. So I implore you to listen to the question that we'll be asking, but also the answers and the advice that these leaders are going to be presenting to us. And again, what I really value about these panels, and they're not going to be presenting abstract leadership stories, but these are women who have had to make this decision in difficult moments, but also build trust across differences and across the line, but also continue to move forward even when conditions were uncertain. So I wanted us to begin there, right? Not with you, but with actual lived leadership. And so so happy to set that framing. Wanted to just launch straight into the question. So for the first question, right, to start us off, I really would love to hear from each of our panelists, particularly Na'ilah, as you do so much of your work, right, happens inside advocacy system where strategy and coalition leadership matters deeply. What does leading loudly mean in your work? And how has that shown up for you during moments of uncertainty or change?
I love that question. And hello, everyone. What was not said is I'm a PhD student here at CUNY at the Graduate Center. So it's always great to be in space with other scholars as well. But I also am pursuing my PhD because I have 25 years of experience as a practitioner with social justice coalitions. And so to that question, I'm going to answer through three lenses just very quickly because I'm really excited to hear what Joan and Mimi have to say. But leading loudly means naming the reality that we are trying to navigate as advocates as is, right? Oftentimes the systems that we're trying to navigate, which are rooted in white supremacy, patriarchy, all the isms, all the obias, there is ambiguity in these spaces that is rewarded for polite silence, right? And when we're trying to be polite and navigate ambiguity without naming the thing that needs to be named, we are perpetuating these systems that we're trying to fight back against. So I think it's really important in the pursuit of leading loudly, name the thing that needs to be named clearly. And that brings me into the second point, which is really just about the clarity of our strategy as advocates when we're trying to really navigate an ecosystem of advocacy that is very complex. And it's complex for a lot of the reasons: organizations, people, personalities, the broader political landscape, which forces shifts within our own coalitions, which changes relationships and alliances. No such thing as permanent friends or permanent enemies, just mutual interests. And I think it's really important in the pursuit of leading loudly, making sure that we are clear in our strategy of how we as coalitions or how we as organizations choose to move forward and navigating, again, that ecosystem that is constantly changing. Otherwise, you're playing a really ever-losing game of whack-a-mole without that strategic clarity and without naming the thing that needs to be named in the political reality that we're trying to deal with. And last but not least, I think leadership, to me, in terms of the loudness of how we show up, it's direction, right? I think sometimes through a coalitional lens, we get busy in the activity, right? We get busy in the busyness of it all. And that's not strategy, that's not focus, that's not direction, right? That's just busyness. That's performative as opposed to being productive. And so leading loudly, I think, really requires us to be intentional about focusing on our direction as social justice coalitions, as opposed to just doing things because we can, as opposed to doing things strategically that lead us to moving the political needle. So I will stop there, and I look forward to the rest of the conversation.
Thank you so much for that point, Na'ilah. And on that note, I'm also gonna come to you next, Mimi, because your work also asks you to lead in spaces where like community voice and resilience are central. So how has that shaped what leading loudly means for you in your work?
Ooh, I'm telling you, I hate coming after Na'ilah. All the time, but just for everyone's FYI, Na'ilah and I work in this community. I come from the justice impacted community, but fun fact, I used to do a lot of policy work and just be in that space when I was younger and I didn't have a voice, right? I was just there, I was watching, I was observing, maybe even waiting for like permission to be invited to the space, right? And now, years later, especially after me coming home from prison and just dealing with the community of the women that I deal with, for us, leading loudly now is not leading with our story, but leading with honesty, right? Because they're gonna throw all of that in our faces, like, how dare you now be here, and now how dare you try to be the loudest in the room or ask questions or speak, right? And so now, as I listen to the women's story, as I even am trying to navigate these spaces myself with the programs that we're creating, it's really coming from an honest place. Like, yes, we have all of these barriers, but our voice matters as well, right? We need to be in these spaces as well, and not you telling us what we need, but us telling you what we want, right? And so that is where when you came up, when I had these questions, I was like, you know what? It has to be not just our story, but with our honesty, so they don't smack us in the face with how dare you wanting to even be a leader. How dare you? And so that's where we come with in moments of uncertainty, especially in the work that I do, a lot of women want to shrink back, like I said, and just wait to be invited. But programs like Power that we have created, we're teaching the women that no, you definitely can be in any space. You definitely don't have to be screaming and shouting to the rooftop to be noticed. But just lead with honesty. Lead with honesty, and that's definitely going to open many, many, many doors because your story matters and your voice matters. So
Thank you, Mimi. Yeah, no, it's exactly correct. Being unabashed and like not being shameful and claiming your power, but also, standing up in your power. Because that's what they're hoping to cause you to shrink yourself. And I'm also gonna pass it over to Joan as well. To answer the question, like, what does leading louding mean to you and your work, and how has that shown up for you during moments of uncertainty or change?
Good afternoon, everyone. Joan Alexander Bachardine here from the Brooklyn branch of the NAACP and the community. So leading loudly for me means refusing to shrink in the face of injustice, even when the room gets quiet. When the stakes get high, the path forward is unclear. It's using whatever platform I have to name the hard truths, to protect my people, and to move institutions and folks closer to equity, even when those in power get uncomfortable. So it means centering the voices of those most impacted, like Mimi and Na'ilah. So even when it's inconvenient, but especially when it complicates a narrative that powerful people would prefer to tell. It shows up in pushing back on the performative equity efforts, like affordable housing, when affordability uses a formula that prices out the existing community, insisting on real accountability and making sure decisions are not made without our communities, about our communities. It is when we lean into concept of a democracy table that people come to before, I'll say it again, before decisions are made by the communities that are most impacted. They're at that table. So why not come to them transparently, over secrecy, with clarity over politeness, and justice over expediency, to make sure that we are collectively progressing this business of sustainability forward. So during those moments of uncertainty and change, whether it's leadership transition, political shifts, crises that expose long-standing inequities, leading loudly has looked like three things for me. It is naming, so you've heard this already, naming what others are afraid to say out loud, so people feel seen and not gaslit by the moment. It's holding the line on values when pressure mounts, to keep the peace and to go along to get along. And it's about creating space for collective processing and action, so that folks aren't just watching change happen to them, but are organized to shape it. Because there have been times when speaking truth to power meant that I was the only one in the room asking, okay, who was actually harmed by this decision? And who benefits when we fix it? What would this look like if Black and Brown communities were truly at the center? These moments are rarely comfortable, but they are where long-term civil rights leadership is tested, when you risk your access, your relationships, and your own level of comfort to protect the dignity and right of others. That's leading loudly. Because ultimately, in my work, it's about making sure silence is never mistaken for consent. It is a practice of showing up again and again as a clear, consistent voice for justice, especially when the future feels as shaky as the future feels shaky now. Because people need to know that someone and collected someones are willing to stand flat-footed, 10 toes down, in truth with them. So for me, that is leading loudly.
Thank you, Jones. Powerful words. And I really hope folks are actively listening and writing down notes. And in fact, Joan, if you don't mind, I'm going to stay with you for a moment and ask you to start us off with question two. So one thing you highlighted, right, very passionately, is that we are all of our works are connected, and that we lead in none of us lead in static environments, right? That advocacy work often requires making decisions while conditions are changing, and that often leadership is not about having full certainty, but knowing how to move even when clarity isn't complete. And so, Joan, right, you bring a history of civil rights leaderships and speaking truth to power, right, across very different moments in time. As you work in environments where political condition, funding, community needs are constantly shifting, how do you maintain clarity and direction when the landscape feels uncertain?
So as a Black woman, so I've been Black all my life,
Yeah.
leading the NAACP Brooklyn branch in this moment means balancing long-term goals with short-term pressures. So it's not theoretical for me, it's a daily reality. As winds shift, political funding streams dry up and suddenly reappear, but with strings attached. Crises in community demand an immediate response. And yet, our mandate for systemic change remains the same. My superpower is the pivot, the ability to adjust tactics quickly without losing sight of the mission. For me, maintaining clarity starts with being crystal clear about our North Star, building Black political power, advancing civil rights, and protecting our community's dignity. When that is a non-negotiable, everything else becomes movable. I might pivot the how, the program, the partner, the timeline, but I never pivot the why. That means when a grant falls through, we reimagine the strategy instead of abandoning the goal. When a political ally becomes a roadblock, we organize around them instead of shrinking back. For example, when we were working on the Flatbush African burial ground, a person that I thought was an ally, was one of the people that told me that it couldn't happen. I took great pride in coming back when the dust settled and we were successful, to remind them that it requires the people and the will of the people to progress any agenda point. So my pivot also shows up in how I lead my executive committee and members through uncertainty. I do three things. I name the moment honestly so that everyone understands the stakes and they don't feel blindsided. I reframe the disruption as information, not failure, because what is this shift teaching us about what our community needs now, as opposed to what we thought they required? We'll quickly map what is essential versus what is flexible, so we can cut out noise and protect our core work. Yes, everyone is talking about deed theft and reparations and redistricting as a current hot topic, but we have been here before it was sexy. And we still will be here until there is a meaningful change that protects our people, our rights to generational wealth, and fair and just representation. As a woman in leadership, there's an extra layer. We are often expected to absorb chaos quietly and make it look effortless. My practice of leading loudly means I resist it. I'm transparent about constraints. I invite my team into problem solving, and I model that changing course is a strength and not a weakness. The pivot for me is not abandoning the plan. It is choosing our people over our ego, our values over our vanity metrics, and our long-term liberation over any short-term pressure to play it safe. So the way I stay clear in chaos is simple. I let the vision be sacred and the strategy be agile. That's how we can honor long-term civil rights goals while still moving deftly through the daily fires, always ready to pivot the plan, but not abandon the purpose.
Woo!
I
I'm
said
gonna have
the
to, I wish I
same
had my
thing,
little
Mimi.
horn. Woo!
I said the same thing. I'm fired up. Oh my God, Joan. I mean, I was
Yeah.
gonna ask a follow-up question too,
Ooh.
but I think you captured it.
Joan, can I jump in, please? I know Na'ilah, I want to swim first.
Go
I
ahead,
mean,
Mimi.
I'm gonna be honest. I just learned the pivot game in working with nonprofit, because before it was always a straight no, there is no funding, you can't do it, and it was always me finding ways to do it with no funding, right? And I think I'm gonna piggyback on what you said. As long as the goal is the same, I don't care if we're marching, that's free, right? I don't care if I'm creating power of voice with a $500,000 grant that I have to like think of ways to spend it so we can be the loudest, the most visible, right? But not every shift means that we are off track. As long as you keep that North Star, right? It really does not matter because I'm telling you, I'm right now working with 3 organizations, one with like 4 million, another one, oh, we really don't have it, but you have one and one with 0. Because sometimes the organization can have the greatest idea and can make the most impact. But if your account doesn't say, we have $500 million or we have a track record, you're not going to get that funding. Let's be clear. You're not going to get the money, but if you keep going at it, we're going to do not one march. This time we're going to do 5 marches back to back. We're still going to be seen. I'm still going to make sure that I'm the loudest. And so I just think that, not every distraction, this doesn't have to be distraction. It can just be an evolution. And that's it. And so, I just had to piggyback off. Go ahead, Naila. Because I had to drop the mic with her.
One more time for the folks in the back. There's nothing else to add, except one element, I think, in terms of stability. One, yes, staying anchored in purpose. If things are constantly changing, and when we're anchored in our purpose, as Mimi and Joan have already uplifted, it's about remembering the work and, most importantly, the why, right? And also want to follow up and just amplify +1 on strategy is more important than reaction, and just constantly having to stay focused on what our North Star is and making sure that our strategy evolves as needed to make sure that we're staying on track. A military lesson I learned when I was in the Army was sometimes you have to change course to stay on course, but your destination is the same, right? So just, constantly doing the check-ins. The last part that hasn't been mentioned, but is core to all of this, threaded throughout all the different responses Mimi and Joan have elevated. In an ecosystem and a political landscape that is constantly shifting, I have found that relationships stabilize the work, meaning trusted coalitions will adapt when the conditions shift, right? And so really thinking about the role that relationships play when they are strong and when there is trust, in terms of how do we create stability amongst each other, so when those conditions shift, we have the trust through our relationships that we can adapt effectively, and making sure that we are still driving advocacy as opposed to reacting to everything that is constantly being thrown our way. So maintaining clarity isn't necessarily something that we do alone. We can't do that by ourselves, but I think it's definitely a tool that can be used when we build it collectively, when we as coalitions, again, have that trust through our relationships that's really rooted, to the point that Joan and Mimi made, rooted in our shared purpose, and then just, again, guided by our relationships.
This is the perfect transition to our next question. I'm actually going to go back to you, Mimi. I love your energy. So as Na'ilah gently lay the foundation for us, one of the realities, right, of advocacy is that very little happens alone, right? And that even when leadership feels personal, the actual work, requires coalition, right? Which in turn also requires trust and sometimes a willingness to sit inside tension. So I'd love to ask you, Mimi, particularly since your work centers voices that institutions do not always prioritize. As you work within complex coalition, right, and community ecosystems, what have you learned about building trust and alignment across differences, especially when stakes are high?
I think I know, not that I think. I learned now to not only work in regards to partnership with organizations that we all have kind of the same mission, right? But now working with the justice impacted community, I need allies. Like, we definitely need other people to get another point of view. Sometimes we get so tunnel vision, right? That we may not even know that this person is kind of an ally, right? We may not even know it. And so, one thing about uh 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 coalition building now that we're in a coalition, right? TCF is in a coalition of 12. And sometimes I get so caught up in I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna do that I don't even think to ask them, how can they help me? How can we work together? Yes, maybe the work that you do is not the same work that we do, but I get kind of lost and not find how can we all build together for the bigger cause, right? Because you're right, Na'ilah, we cannot do this work alone. I definitely figured that out. Sometimes we feel like we're in competition because this one is going to get this grant and we want it and we need it. No, why can't we just all come together and let them know we're going to work together to make this change? And we let us figure out how we're going to divvy this money up and how we can all work together and what causes. Like, I find it sometimes that we're there and we're talking about budgets, we're talking about this, we're talking about everything else except that North Star, right? And I think that we can maybe even get more power as we work together than not.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel about that.
Thank you, Mimi.
Yes.
And gonna go ask because being conscious of time and we want to
Yes.
make space for people to be able to raise questions. I'm gonna ask a lot as I ask the remaining questions. I want folks in the audience to start thinking of the questions that you would want to ask the panelists. Any clarification or additional information you want to know or more guidance. But going to our fourth question, and I'm gonna look at you, Na'ilah. I want to name something that we don't always discuss enough in leadership space, and that is that advocacy work can be emotionally demanding, right? Progress is often slow. You face constant resistance, and for many women leaders, we're carrying both institutional pressure but also community responsibility at the same time. So I have a question for you, Na'ilah. Like, what helps you sustain your leadership and stay grounded when progress feels slow or resistance is strong?
Oh, I love that question. I want to go back and just answer just very, very quickly the third question regarding, what does it look like to build trust and alignment when we're managing all these different things? Because elected officials don't pass bills, coalitions do, right? And so we have to work in community with each other if we want to dismantle all the systems of oppression, if we choose to use policy as a tool. Other people have other methods. But the two things I think that are really important that Mimi brought in, but I really just want to highlight, is that alignment matters in our work more so than complete agreement. Right. And that goes back to the point that, we have different organizations that represent different constituencies, that have different priorities, that have different types of power. And so it's just really important, I think, to recognize that we, as, organizers, as strategists, as advocates, be honest about, again, leaning into the alignment more so than 100% agreement with one another. If we share the same North Star, then that can work. And then also honestly being honest about the power that we bring into coalitions. There's power dynamics, there's grassroots groups, people who are policy experts, some folks who have the political access. And so we all have different dimensions of power that we bring into the coalitions or the community spaces that we're in. And I think that's really important when it comes to how we build our trust and our alignment with each other before we try to face whatever it is that we're trying to face externally in terms of the political conditions that we're navigating. Pivoting to this question about what keeps me grounded. A lot of sage. And honestly, this work is really hard and it can be emotionally draining. And I get more gray hairs every time I make it through another election season or a budget cycle. But I really love who I work with, right? And also my understanding and approach to this work is that advocacy is generational, right? Oftentimes, because we work through an organizational or coalition lens, we're constantly thinking about things through a short-term cycle, about the election cycle, or through the budget/legislative cycle, right? And so we make our plans, we create our partnerships and our allyships based off of, these very truncated timelines, but understanding that most wins that we're able to secure are built over years versus one cycle or 2 cycles, right? And so I think for me, what keeps me grounded is understanding that I'm playing the long game. And again, back to my earlier comment, it really is staying rooted in the people that breathe life into me. It's, again, this work is hard. And so it's really important that, we find joy with the people that we're building power with. One of the guiding questions I've asked myself across my 20 plus years of doing work in advocacy is, what are we building? Who are we building it with? And why are we building it? And the most important question is the who, right? If what we are building is not in partnership with the who and the why, then what we're building does not have any sustainable infrastructure, right? And so for me, something I'm always grateful for, again, is, always thinking through the broader why and understanding that this is a long game, and to find joy and purpose, and sometimes cries, but oftentimes a lot of laughter with the people that we're building with in this long-term movement work.
That's well said. Thank you, Na'ilah. And I'm also going to pass it over to you, Joan, briefly to, answer the question of like, what has helped you sustain your endurance and help you stay grounded?
Thank you so much, Taina. But I need to pivot back for a quick second to the question of coalition. I'll be very brief, because what I've learned is that alignment is not agreement on everything. It is choosing to move together in the pieces where we do agree, while respecting that different organizations have different roles, timelines, and levels of risk that they can take. But building collective power over time means honoring the roles. Some of us are disruptors, some are negotiators, some have care for folks in the aftermath, as we've heard from Mimi, and understanding that all of us together is how our community wins. So now I go back to what sustains me. So it's remembering that I'm part of a lineage, not a moment. In my leadership role, I ground myself in the understanding that our ancestors fought for freedoms they never got to fully enjoy. And we often plant seeds we may never personally harvest. That keeps me from confusing slow progress with no progress. So when the resistance is strong, I come back to these anchors. I practice daily things that protect my spirit: prayer, reflection, and time with people who know me, Na'ilah, outside of my title. I need spaces where I'm not president, just a whole person who could laugh, grieve, rest, and have my TED Talks. And then I practice collective leadership. I don't carry this alone. I lean on my executive committee, our members, my collaborators, and I let myself be poured into, not just poured out. Because sharing leadership means sharing the burden and the joy. And I stay close to my community. When policy fights drag on or systems feel immovable, I go back to the rooms, the church basements, the school auditoriums, the blocks where our people are organizing and testifying and showing up for each other. Their courage reminds me why the work matters more than any one setback. Longevity means giving myself position to pace, like Na'ilah says, to pace, because it's not a sprint in some cases. So I say no more often. It's taken me to realize that no is a full sentence. So I get protected time for strategic thinking, not just crisis response. And I hold on to small win. One family protected, one young person who decides to step into leadership, and passage of the jury of our peers' bill as proof. Listen, that change is happening even when the larger systems are slow to move. This is how I stay grounded, by honoring the weight of this work and the joy and dignity of doing it in community over the long haul.
Listen, I want to get my tissue because I'm like this right now. There's not a lot to say after that. And I want space for the audience because I agree with you. I agree with Na'ilah. I just want to share one little moment. For me, right, back in the day, nobody was going to tell me that I wasn't going to be this great actress, right? And taking the art of pivoting, right? Staying grounded now for me is still doing the work and still having fun. I'm an artivist. I find ways to to do this work that brings me pleasure, whether it's my programs, Knitting Through Justice, my other program, Comic Book for Justice, doing a lot of artivist work with the women that I work with who are poets, who are dancers. And so I think that also with this work that we bring, we don't have to drain ourselves to continue to do the work. Find your happy place. Find a place that you can still be true to thyself and still, pass this work along. And one thing I want to say too, I don't know where this fits in this space, but I hope one day to see a justice impacted women in a political space. I hope to see a woman president one day. All of that. I know that the work that we're doing, like you said, we're planting seeds and we may not see it, but I hope in my lifetime I see the first woman president. That's all.
It will happen.
It's gonna happen. That's why we're here. It's Women Day. It's CUNY.
Exactly.
We're here. Even if it's one of you panelists out there, I want to see it because we're all here together in this space right now.
Exactly.
Okay, look at this number. I'm excited. I want to dance.
Exactly. Looking at the next generation of women leaders, it will
That's
happen.
it.
Yeah.
That's all I want. That's why we do this work. It has to be us in the forefront.
Exactly. And I love this tone. So I'm gonna stick with you, Mimi, but I want all of us to answer this next question. Oh, you're making me so like passionate and emotional. But like I want us to close our conversation by bringing this back to like what you mentioned, Mimi, to the women who are here with us today, right? Many of them are building their own leadership voice, right? Trying to find their own stance, whether it is in advocacy and institution policy or even community work. And one of the most powerful things about conversation like this is that they can shorten someone else's learning curve, right? So my final question for each of you is, starting with you, Mimi, for women who are interested in advocacy, organizing, or overall policy leadership, especially within the CUNY or community-based spaces, what guidance would you offer as they step into this leadership role? And before you answer, I especially encourage you all to not just share advice, but maybe, an example or something you learned
Well, I think
later.
well, now I could expand a little bit. Like I said, I went to school for drama. No political science, no nothing. No one told me that I was not going to be this actress, but I always had this to make change, right? I had this within me to make change. And I think that no, I don't think I know. Even after going to prison and coming back, it's never too late. It's never too late to make change. It's never too late to use, as Miss Jones said, the pivot game to advance woman power. I think that whatever your strong point is, find it, take it, and make it your own. Right? We don't need somebody to invite us to that table. You don't need someone to, well, what should I do? You can figure it out. We can figure it out. We're too powerful not to. You don't have to do it alone. We talked about all these tools, right? I feel like what I was missing when I was younger that led me to the path was the resources. When I was younger, I used to be out there with all the politicians with my little banner, but no one ever told me, this is the path you can take to run. This is what you can do. They left me right there in that corner. So guess what happened once I put that banner down? The other boys came and picked me up right in that corner. And so having resources and tools and coming to these type of spaces and getting all the information. When Na'ilah was talking right now, I feel like I was in class. I feel like I was in one of the power courses, just collecting all these gems and jewels. And so never stop learning, never stop doing what you want to do, because change comes in so many spaces. And I just believe in that everyone has the opportunity to make that change as long as you continue to look for the resource and know that every information, like you said today, grab a pen and paper. Because it could be that one thing that makes you open your eyes and create the change that you want to see.
I'm of the mindset that you are not an aspiring leader. You are already leadership.
Yes.
It's recognizing that you don't have to prove that you belong, but that the space is now more complete because you're present. It's documenting everything, keeping receipts, the notes, the agreements in writing. And because what it does is it protects you and the people, and it makes it easier for you to share that knowledge. And then pick a lane in the rhythm, like choose a space to operate in. Because if you try to do everything, it's going to be exhausting. So, yes, I understand that if you want to get something done, you give it to a woman. However, it is acceptable to be selective on how you show up while also creating space to continue to pour into yourself and then pause for joy. Because without celebration, everything becomes overwhelming. So those are the nuances that I learned, and it's taken me many years to get here. And hopefully you see value in what I've stated.
Yes, plus to everything that Mimi and Joan said, I'll share two things since this is the broader, which is focused on leadership within advocacy, policy organizing, is master the tools of the game. Right. You know, one of the things that you can really take time to do to prepare yourself is understand how these systems work, because advocacy is not just about passion, it's about strategy. Right. And so really lean into understanding how budgets work, how the government works, those points of intersection, because once you learn the formal process and the informal process, you will be able to be more effective in your leadership, learning how to navigate the landmines that you may not necessarily are aware of being there. I will land the plane by saying, moving more into like the soft skills, is protect your peace and chase your purpose. Do not chase titles. Do not chase organizations. Do not chase people. Because if you chase the titles, the people, or the organizations, you will be burned out, used up, spit out, and you will be not happy because you are not grounding your pursuit of advocacy in what it is that you were called to do. And that is your purpose. And so the things that have guided me and have helped protect me and ground me in this work, almost 30 years in at this point, has been finding ways to protect my peace. And I have been able to protect my peace by being able to stay grounded in my purpose, by staying, aligned with projects that allow me to work in alignment with my purpose, as opposed to choosing projects based off of name brands, titles, or any of the other superficial markers, if you will. So protect your peace and be clear in your purpose.
I'm so sorry, I'm muted. But thank you everyone for your wisdom. Thank you for everything that you shared about like just not about leadership, but just how leadership is practiced. I'm gonna take a moment now. I know we're really getting close on time, and I want to open it up to the audience for a couple of questions because I know many people listening are also thinking about how these lessons connect to their own work and leadership journey. So taking a moment now, folks, to share your questions, and I'm going to also monitor the chat as well. Oh, we already have some question drop in the chat. I'm going to start reading it. And folks, apologies if I butcher your name. We have a question from the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies, Sonaya. She asks, for people who feel called to advocacy but don't know where to begin, what are some trusted places, program, or community groups where someone new can plug in and start learning without feeling overwhelmed?
Ooh.
Who wants to take that one?
I guess I'll jump in since everybody muted the post. All right, so I currently am at College and Community Fellowship. It's a nonprofit organization that helps women who are just as impacted achieve their higher education. But we have a policy department, and we have a 12-week course that you can definitely spread the word, right? Yes, we have a 12-week cohort who teaches women how to do their advocacy action plan. We also give them the tools and the resources needed, how Na'ilah talked about it. And hint, hint, she is the program, the director in regards to teaching the ladies. And so we have wonderful policy programs over here. So anyone who is justice impacted, please, please, please visit our website and join us.
So for me, I was going to do self promotion, and then I thought, wait a minute, let me be let me be general, because immediately I go, well, you can come to the NAACP. There's always space, time, and opportunity here, right? But then I thought about myself before I became involved in with the NAACP, and even while I was with the community board, right? You can go to your community, Google community board in my borough, because what it does, then you can enter in your address, and you'll see which community board you're a part of, because it's your entree to government, and it is your entree to community work, right? Because then through that engagement, you'll become actively involved with your community, with the elected officials, with all the things and people that move the needle. And then by default, you will determine how and where you can plug in to do better for your community and for yourself.
And to plug in NYC, well, it's actually not just NYC, but there's also an existing program. It's called Choral Leadership. It's a state program. I believe it's a 6-week program where you essentially just learn everything about the state inner goings for government, both state and city, but also to learning how to develop your own leadership capacity. And it's rigorous training. And when you come out of it, you have all the skills essentially that you need to be able to take on these environments. So there's
on
multiple
ramps. And on ramps, right? Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Unless folks have anything else to add for that question, I also added the link for the choral, but I'm gonna ask the other question. So I see one again from Sanaya, Mimi, or actually anyone. Actually, your leadership has created pathways that didn't exist before. As you think about the legacy of your work, what do you hope the next generation of young advocates will carry forward, and what do you hope they will do differently? So great question. That was for you, Mimi, or anyone,
I
or
know I'm here soaking it because hint, hint, I know you, Sonia. I know of Sonia at that school. I do. And Sonia, you're a great example of what I wanted to see and what I saw. When Sonia came to my space, she didn't even know where she wanted to go, right? And I saw her recently at Albany. She does great work with her union. And I'm looking at her, I was like, Sonia, you can do more. You're in the union. You need to be up there. I just want to continue to see women win and grow. And sometimes, again, I want to go back to what we said before. Sometimes we don't even know what to ask, how to grow, right? Like we just didn't know. Some people, if right now, if Joan didn't say about the community board, some people wouldn't even know about what community board, where. Because I'm telling you, I was one of those people standing there, and he never told me to join the community board. Shame on him. Like, why wouldn't you tell me before about resources? And so, I just want to see women like Sonia continue to win, continue to show up in these spaces, continue to get the information and the resources. So that one day, again, I'm going to see one of you be the first woman president. That is my overall goal when it comes to this work, because I know we can.
yes.
Mhm.
And if I could add before others say, Joan, you mentioned something that was very powerful. In fact, you dropped several gems throughout this conversation. In particular, you had mentioned that so there's this expectation for women leaders, right, to take the complexity, the difficult stuff, and to turn it around and then make it pretty and like quiet and sensible, and you've rejected that narrative, right? And you boldly and you loudly serve as yourself, right? Presenting as yourself. And so that is my hope for the next generation, to continue to reject that narrative, right? To continue to be unabashed and show up loudly as yourself. Do not allow them to let your strength to come up. Somebody say, "Oh, you're being loud, you're being loud, you disrupting things." Disrupt for sure.
Unapologetic.
Exactly. And I think that was the last questions. Unless anyone want to unmute and ask any questions or comments, but
No, I just want to say, I'm Dali Martinez, the Chancellor Chief of Staff, and this has been so inspiring, so amazing. I love your passion. I love your purpose. I love everything you had to say, and I'm really, really grateful for your participation. So I hope we get to see each other in person in the near future. So
we
thank
love
you
this.
Thank
doing
you
the
so
great
much.
and awesome
Thank you
work
for the
that you're doing.
opportunity.
Thank you. And I want to thank everyone for just coming over here, because you could have been anywhere in the world and you
Anywhere
came
else.
here to spend time
Absolutely.
with us. I want to drop, like I said, College and Community Fellowship. My name is Mimi Coffee. You can find me in many spaces. I wear many hats. I know a lot of us do in here. So, yes, I am doing shameful plugs right now. The Social Justice Network. And so there's so many spaces that we can advocate together. So please find me, join me, reach out. I welcome everyone.
I do also want to re-up like what Mimi you had offered, the course that your organization provide. I really implore folks to look into it.
Yes.
Reach out to Mimi to know
Mhm.
about this.
Yes.
It's very, very, and also the same for NAACP
And
as well.
again, I think there's so many spaces that we can collaborate, right? It doesn't have to be justice impacted, because like I said, you can facilitate, we can volunteer at your organization, we can
Absolutely.
be in so many
Bring the narrative
spaces.
about voter activations, right? Because
Yes,
we
yes.
say it every single year, so I'm gonna say for everyone in the back, this is the most important election of your lifetime.
Yeah.
So we're here for that. We offer resources, support, activation opportunities. Just reach out.
Yes. And thank you. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to our organizers. I also want to also acknowledge you as well, Dolly, and the work that the Chancellor have been doing. Thank you for showing up
you.
for students,
Thank you, Dolly.
especially Black, and I'm still not, yes, BIPOC, but Black students. Thank you for showing up for Black student, women student, and the work that you do every day. I know CUNY is out there really helping folks with enrollment and just being able to afford to continue their education, let alone get an education. Because I strongly believe that, if you want to go to college, you should be able to go to college. And I do thank you, CUNY, for the work that you've been doing. Thank you for the panelists.
Thank
This was
you as a great
amazing.
moderator, and I hope we're collaborating with like John Jay, John Jay College of Criminal Justice. We have a wonderful president, Carol Mason. I don't know if you have been working with John Jay, it will be a great opportunity. And also our law school is all about social justice. So I know that there are a lot of ways that we can collaborate and work together for the same
Looking
goal.
forward to the opportunity. Absolutely.
We look
Thank you.
And
forward
thank you,
to connect.
Camille. We're so glad that we can provide inspiration and empowerment to you.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone,
you.
as well.
All right, be
Thank
well.
See you in the next session. Next time
Yes.
back.
Next one.
Bye.
Stay
All right.
persistent. Bye,
Thank you.
folks.
Okay.